She lost her son in war, then lost her dignity at school, until someone pressed record. Now the world knows her name. At 6:03 a.m., long before the school hallways of Eastbrook Academy in Tennessee buzzed with children's footsteps, Ruth Whitman quietly entered through the service door. Her knees ached as always. Cold mornings like this made them worse, the kind of stiffness only people who've lived through real grief understand. Ruth had been the janitor here for nearly 10 years. She wore the same olive-green uniform every shift, carried the same battered thermos filled with cinnamon tea, and greeted every teacher with a quiet nod. She never complained, even when she mopped up vomit or scraped gum from the underside of auditorium seats. Her son had died in Afghanistan, and since then, she'd folded her life into quiet duty. This morning, though, something went wrong. She had just finished cleaning the second-floor hallway when a sharp pressure in her abdomen struck like lightning. The custodian restroom was 2 floors down, and she knew she wouldn't make it. The closest bathroom was marked staff only, and she hesitated, then limped toward it. She locked the door behind her. No more than 2 minutes passed before a loud knock shook the frame. "Who's in there?" came the voice. Icy, commanding. Ruth froze. She knew that voice. Principal Gregory Sutter. A man who smiled for press photos but never for staff. The same man who once told Ruth during an award ceremony, support staff should never be seen during events. She opened the door slowly, her hands still damp. "What were you doing in there?" he barked. It was an emergency, sir. That restroom is for faculty. You know the rules." "I didn't have time. My leg," she started, but stopped. She could already see the form in his hand. A written warning. He handed it to her like a death sentence. "I want this signed by end of day. Any further violations, and we'll have to consider termination. No eye contact. No pause to ask if she was okay." By lunch, the warning was posted on the janitor's closet door. Teachers passed by. Some looked away. One even chuckled. But someone else, a sophomore named Eli Parker, had seen the incident, and he had filmed everything. That video would become something else entirely. By 10:42 p.m., the video had reached 1,000 views. By midnight, it passed 20,000. By dawn, the entire county was watching. The footage wasn't fancy, just shaky phone footage from a high school hallway. But it captured everything. Ruth, frail and apologetic, facing Principal Gregory Sutter, who towered over her like a prosecutor at sentencing. His tone was cold, his eyes indifferent. And in that moment, a janitor being disciplined for relieving herself during a medical emergency, the world saw something bigger. The comments exploded. "This is racism, plain and simple. 10 years of service, and this is how they treat her?" She lost her son fighting for this country. And now this. By 6 a.m., Eli Parker's clip had been shared by 3 civil rights pages and 1 local news anchor. By 8:15, CNN had contacted the school for a statement. The Eastbrook administration stayed silent. At 9 a.m., Ruth arrived at school as usual. She had no idea. The whispering began immediately. Students stared longer than usual. Some teachers avoided eye contact. Others looked at her with sympathy. But none of it prepared her for what happened next. At 9:27 a.m., the front office phone rang. The receptionist stood frozen after answering. Then she whispered to Mr. Sutter, who scoffed, until he saw who entered the school lobby. 2 U.S. Army generals. One wore full-service dress, the other a simple officer's uniform. Their badges glittered under the harsh fluorescence. Every eye turned. Even the students went silent. The taller one stepped forward, paused, and said, "I served with Sergeant Malcolm Whitman. He was a hero. And this woman, his mother, will be treated with the respect she deserves." Effective immediately. He handed Principal Sutter a folded letter. Official Department of Defense seal. Sutter's face drained of color. In less than a minute, everything changed. Students clapped. Some stood on chairs. One teacher cried openly. Ruth stood still, confused, overwhelmed. The generals turned to her and saluted. The day the generals arrived became known as Wednesday of Reckoning among Eastbrook students. It was the day no one could unsee what they had seen. The day whispers turned to voices. And the day Principal Gregory Sutter realized that control, once lost, is rarely regained. That morning, a student-led sit-in began at the school's atrium. Dozens of students sat cross-legged, holding signs that read, "Dignity for Ruth, Justice for Workers, and Silence is Complicity." The student who had filmed the video, Eli Parker, was now standing beside Ruth Whitman, not as a child looking up to an elder, but as an equal demanding respect. Ruth, still in her green uniform, was stunned. She had lived decades keeping her head down, taught by experience that speaking up only led to being ignored. But now, faces of every color were turning toward her, not in pity, but in admiration. Outside, local media vans lined the street. Inside, a wave was building. At 10 a.m., an emergency school board meeting was called. For the first time in years, the teachers' union requested public attendance. And for the first time ever, Ruth was invited to speak. Principal Sutter, however, was absent. Word had spread that he had locked himself in his office. The man who once dismissed Ruth without a glance now refused to leave his chair. It wasn't guilt. It was fear that he had become a symbol of everything wrong with the system. The superintendent arrived at noon. He didn't enter through the usual back door but walked straight into the atrium, where over 150 students had now gathered. Teachers had stopped classes, some standing alongside their students, others wiping away tears. He stood beside Ruth and said, "We failed you. Not just this week, but for years. This institution was supposed to honor service, not punish it. Ruth Whitman, today we correct that." The crowd held its breath. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a printed plaque. It read, "Ruth Whitman Service Wing, dedicated to a decade of quiet strength." Cheers broke out. Ruth's eyes welled. Even the teachers, long trained to stay neutral, clapped. And in the midst of it, the janitor who had once mopped unnoticed corners of the school became the name above a hallway. But the reckoning wasn't over yet. That afternoon, an anonymous leak reached a local journalist. Old emails from Gregory Sutter. In them, he referred to support staff as visual clutter. In another, he asked a colleague if the cleaning lady can be rotated to night shift, she's scaring the donors. By 4:15 p.m., those emails were trending nationally. By 6 o'clock, a formal investigation into Sutter's conduct was announced. And by the time the sun set on Eastbrook Academy, the man who ruled by silence was now silenced. The air inside Eastbrook Academy hung heavy the next morning. No cameras, no generals, no cheering crowd. Just Ruth Whitman, standing quietly in the same hallway she had mopped for years, now named after her. The plaque gleamed under the morning light, but she hardly looked at it. She wasn't thinking about her name being engraved on a wall. She was thinking about how, for over a decade, she had walked past a certain door marked staff only, but everyone knew what it really meant. Not for you. Not for your kind. That door was still there. She ran her hand along the cool metal handle. It wasn't locked today, but it didn't matter. Just then, footsteps echoed. Principal Gregory Sutter, tie undone, face pale and drawn, walked toward her. For the first time, he wasn't flanked by his assistant. He wasn't carrying a clipboard. And most noticeably, he wasn't looking down at her. He stopped. I never asked why you used that bathroom," he said quietly. "You never needed to ask," Ruth replied. "I told myself I was protecting order, protocol. But really, I was protecting myself. From seeing the parts of this school I never wanted to confront." Silence stretched between them. "I'm resigning," he said. "Today. And I'll be addressing the students before I go." Ruth didn't move. She didn't nod. Just looked past him, toward the students starting to file in through the front entrance, laughing, carrying backpacks, walking past the sign with her name. "You don't need to resign because of me," she finally said. "I didn't want revenge." He shook his head. "It's not about you anymore. It's about what I helped maintain." Later that morning, the school auditorium filled. Sutter stood on stage. No podium, no prepared speech. Just a man, unraveling his own silence. He admitted to his words. The emails, the bias, the harm. He spoke of how fear dresses itself up as professionalism, and how a nation built on freedom often forgets that dignity should be as basic as breathing. "I made Ruth Whitman a symbol," he said, "when all she wanted was rest for her knees." He looked at the students. "But you made her a reminder that justice doesn't start with policy. It starts with us." Then, without ceremony, he stepped down. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Ruth requested the plaque with her name be taken down. The superintendent asked why. "Because I don't want a wing," she said. "I want that bathroom sign gone." And so it was. The metal plate reading "Staff Only" was removed, replaced by a new sign. "All are welcome." Students watched as Ruth, wearing gloves and with a steady hand, unscrewed the final bolt. The hallway was quiet. But in that silence, something beautiful had finally spoken. Not silent, just softer. Like a place learning to listen. It had been 6 weeks since the confrontation that changed everything. Eastbrook Academy looked the same from the outside. Same bricks, same bell, same faded mural by the entrance. But the people inside, they were different now. And Ruth Whitman, she hadn't changed much. She still came in every morning before sunrise, still brewed her cinnamon tea, still wore the same green uniform that bore the stains of 10 years of honest work. But something had shifted, not around her, but through her. The students greeted her differently now, not with pity, not with performative respect, but with presence. They asked her name. They sat beside her at lunch. One even gave her a hand-drawn portrait of her standing tall in front of a door, with the caption, "She opened more than just a hallway." She kept that drawing in her locker. The Common Room project grew rapidly. What started as a campaign to remove divisive signs became a school-wide movement to reimagine space itself. Students painted murals with themes of inclusion and memory. They renamed the auditorium not after a wealthy donor, but after Mr. Lopez, the night security guard who once saved a child during a fire drill. More schools followed. In neighboring districts, janitors were invited to staff meetings for the first time. Cafeteria workers were interviewed by the school newspaper. One rural high school in Alabama started a wall of thanks, filled with Polaroids of every support staff member and handwritten notes from students. But Ruth stayed quiet through it all. She turned down every television interview. She declined offers to speak at national conferences. When asked why, she simply said, "I didn't want to become a statue. I just wanted to be seen." Yet her silence kept speaking. One morning, she arrived at Eastbrook to find the front doors already unlocked. Inside, a gathering of students waited. They had pooled money from a fundraiser. What for? They'd bought her a pair of orthopedic shoes, not expensive, not flashy, but deeply thoughtful. Inside the box was a note. "For the miles you've already walked, and the ones you made easier for us." Ruth cried for the first time in years. That same week, the superintendent offered her a promotion, supervisor of facilities. A new office, a new title, more money. She thanked him, then shook her head. "I'm 2 years from retirement," she said. "I don't need a title. I need to finish what I started." And she did. 2 years later, on a spring morning humming with bird calls and open windows, Ruth clocked out for the last time. The entire school lined the hallway. No speeches, no stage, just a corridor, cleared, silent, for her final walk down the heart of the school. As she passed, students handed her cranes folded from old worksheets. Teachers bowed their heads. The new principal, a black woman named Dr. Gaines, stood at the end of the hall, eyes full of gratitude. When Ruth reached the door, she turned around once, smiled, and said, "Don't let them build the walls back." Then she stepped outside. She moved to a quiet cottage outside Nashville, near a creek and a small garden. No reporters came. No articles followed. But every year, on the anniversary of that day, students from Eastbrook still gather in that same hallway. They take off their shoes for just 1 minute. And they walk, barefoot, in silence. Not to honor a janitor, but to remember what dignity sounds like when it finally walks free.